love your work. Like,
oh, thank you. I appreciate that very much, especially for my classical guitarist. That's very nice.
Are you gonna clap again?
Is that the other ongoing joke? Do you want to intro this one, or you
go for it. Do your thing.
I'll do it. Okay, I'm gonna clap. There it is. I've clapped. Everybody knows what the clap means because it's the ongoing joke. Because that's when we start the podcast. Welcome to Wood Air Metal, episode 30. Today we have another incredible interview. This has been like interview central for a while, and it's fantastic. This picking into everybody's brains and so on. Last week we had Spiritual Agenda, and this week we have Matt Hollenberg. Cleric. Hollenberg. See, I always screw it up. I gotta keep that going. That's gonna be. I'm intentionally going to do it, or will I? I'll try not to, and that's when I screw it up. It's never ending. It's late. I'm tired. I didn't sleep at all last night, really. But whatever. Enough about me. It doesn't matter because Matt's here from Cleric, and if you haven't listened to Cleric, you haven't lived. I'm just gonna put that out there.
And that's just what we were talking right before you got on, Matt. Just Adam's like, geez, Matt might be like the most prolific guitarist on the planet. Because I think we got your link for how many albums you've been on. It's like 46, 47, something like that.
I think so, yeah. And there's even some missing from that Discogs. That the Discogs thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some missing off there, too. But, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to comprehend that, too, because I don't think I even realized that until, like, a few weeks ago when I looked at it. It's just like, it's almost like you just keep climbing up a mountain and you just, like, when you're done with something, it just falls off the mountain and you're just going to the next thing. And you don't even see there's like a huge pile growing, you know. But no, I'm proud of all of that, and I still, in this weird way, feel like I haven't even formed yet. I feel like the main thing hasn't happened yet, which is maybe sounds strange, but that's just genuinely how I feel. I don't know. I feel like that's all prep for something that's the main thing. Like it hasn't arced out yet. But that might be delusional.
Carving the path for it or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's still building up from my perspective. So
it's 42, at least on the if I'm remembering right. Yeah, which I mean is a great number for all of those Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans out there.
Yeah.
So Matt's actually the answer to the universe.
No, we've hit it, folks, right here on the podcast. No. So, all right. So, Matt, how long have you been playing? You know, like, when did you start? Let's start with the easy stuff first.
Well, music in general, I started at like age 6, and I played piano first. And I was like, every kid, I was filling my schedule at the time. And then I remember hearing this Albanese piece, Astorius, at this funeral. And I was just completely mesmerized and hypnotized. And maybe that was the first time I really experienced sort of a trance thing with music at a young age.
Did you hear it on piano or guitar?
Piano.
Yeah, okay. Nice.
And I went home and figured it out by ear, like most of the piece without the score. And I kind of got into this weird, a lot of musicians know what I'm talking about, right? It's just that trance place of like non-time.
Yeah. Like
you're so hooked into the time that the normal human perception of time kind of melts away, and you're just like, I think that was the first time that I had that experience. But then it's weird. I feel like piano overall maybe was a little too dry for me, sonically, and just because you had to sit there, your posture had to be very specific. you know, I felt very controlled on piano. So, you know, once I discovered rock music, and honestly, when grunge came out when I was in middle school, like I just genuinely wanted to play guitar to get that guitar distortion sound. Because at the like, it wasn't like an old hat thing at that point. I'd never heard anything like it. It was like the coolest thing ever. That sort of sludgy grunge sound. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started playing guitar, maybe like 7th, 8th grade. But that kind of, there was a weird, that was kind of on a lag too, because when the first guitar I got was it was like the steel string acoustic that was $50 at a flea market, and the strings were like 3 inches off the fretboard, and it really hurts to play anything. So I just didn't play for the first year. And then I remember I finally got an electric guitar, and I like stayed home from school one day, and I figured out tab from this online site, and I was playing along with some bands I liked, just along with the drummer. And the first time I experienced playing along with the drummer as a guitarist, I was just like obsessed from that moment. And, you know, and then I went through like just normal stuff kids played at the time, you know, like, you know, Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera, Deftones, Tool. That was kind of right out of the gate. And then later it got into like the 70s stuff, you know, like Zappa, you know, Hendrix, Zeppelin, you know, Mahavishnu, Return to Forever, you know, and then from there it got into like the avant-garde, and then by that point it's like college, and then I'm doing my own music, and then another really formative experience that I think lodged all these albums just is this Warped Tour experience. The second time around really solidified my utter like disinterest in any sort of mainstream path with music. Because I may be between, like, it's weird to think of a band like Cleric playing Warped Tour. It makes literally no sense, but we had this weird hookup. So before we were even basically a band, we were on Warped Tour before we even had a CD or had played a show as a 4-piece. And that 2003 tour went well, as weird as we were. We were trying to be like a mix of Phantomas and Meshuggah, basically, and Candiria, and it went really well by the end of that tour. And then 2004, I think maybe I had the illusions of like, I'll just do this and that, and like you could be on one of those big stages, and then you'll just be on these tours, and it doesn't matter how weird it is. And it just didn't work out that way. And I just started to notice all these things that, you know, are obviously pretty obvious. You know, these bands just care more about their hair, and they're not really into composition for its own sake. It's more about like a image that's projected. I mean, all that's obvious, but I just realized that if that was what a band was, I just was really like over it. And I was already, you know, I was only 20, so I was already cynical, you know what I mean? So at that point I started discovering all this avant-garde stuff, and I realized that's really what I wanted to do. And that from that point is when all these albums started to happen. And then I realized like the better I got at improv, which is not something I focused on before then, you know, the easier it was to compose. So I started focusing on improv like way more, even if I wasn't going to like have solos in a song. It was just to write, just to be able to write. And that's very different than a lot of metal punk musicians who just have no idea what improvising is. They don't do it, period. And I just became focused on improv as like what I focused on when I played by myself. And yeah, I think it just made it more of an exploratory thing, less of like a marketing plan. You know, if you just take like a rock band model of like the early 2000s, it's like there's these scenes, you know, and you're in a scene, and it has its rules. Even if it seems like it's a rebellion, it's not really a rebellion. Mm-hmm. And I think what I really liked about the avant-garde is even if not every musician was really popular, they were just completely naked and distinct in themselves, even if like no one cared. Yeah, I started to realize that like I preferred that to like just filling in a template that a million people had done before. It's almost like going to Six Flags. You're just getting on a roller coaster ride or something. It's like, you know how it's going to end. And I'm interested in the stuff where you don't even know where it's like what the precedent is, you know. I mean, that's what I'm searching for. I'm not saying that's everything I've done. I don't think it's always getting to that point, but that's what's motivating me. And I think that's different than what's motivating someone that's just like trying to get bigger on Warped Tour, trying to just play the music industry game. It's just very boring, isn't it? Like, I don't know. That's just where I got. I mean, I totally get you. 20. Yeah, just at the age of 20, I was already at this point. So, and it's from there to now. It's just maniacal, like manic output of albums. You know, and I'm still telling you, it's like there's a bunch I got to do. You know, and it's like I'm kind of crazy, right? Like, what is that? It's like, well, I think when you base composition off improv, it doesn't really end. When you base it off like a finite marketing plan and branding, it's very like linear, and it's just set, and that's the end. So it's like, it is honestly like, why do you even need 3 albums in a way? You know, you kind of just need 2 albums. I mean, I know that's maybe crazy, but it gets me to that point, and where I think when it's improv based and anything could happen. And some of the best stuff, you know, once I got into more recording too, some of the best stuff recorded is when there's no plan. You know, and shit just happens, and you're like, the player can be even confused when it's happening, and some of that stuff is the best. And they're like, "Well, I didn't even know what I was doing." It's like, yeah, exactly, and it's perfect. It's a mystical quality about it. All that stuff starts to come into your mind, but when you're just setting in a production template, pop punk, metalcore, deathcore, whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Like indie folk, folk freak, black metal, new black metal, like whatever, you know, it's literally gets to a point where it's like LARPing mixed with production templates, you know, and I really don't like that. I don't want to quantize my music. I don't want to attach it to a style, like a fashion style, like a music style is one thing, but so all that stuff's in my mind basically. And it's been since the age of 20 or 21 because of that 2004 experience where I just got really disillusioned and angry because I wanted to do music, but I was just so confused. So it's just this anger almost forced that kind of path, if you want to be honest. And it didn't really seem too much about playing guitar at that point. It was like half about playing guitar, you know? But I guess, like, then I guess when I met Zorn, oh yeah, I'm going on and on. I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. Oh, you're good. It's absolutely. Well, let me butt in for a second, which was, so I've known you since probably 2000, I think, because
definitely.
I moved to New York in 2000, and for sure. So part of Cleric is I knew Nick and Larry before I moved to New York. And so, anyway, I guess one thing that always struck me about you, and it's still the same deal, and it's like no surprise at all that you have 42 albums, is Cleric obviously has grown up with you too, because all the phases, like from Third Rail, I think wasn't it Third Rail for a little bit? Yeah. To Cleric to where it is today. Along that time, though, you always had other projects going on. Like, you seem like the type of person that's like, hey, man, I got this idea for a project. Would you be interested in doing it? And I think generally, at least previously, it was like, yeah, let's try it. Let's see what happens. I guess can you talk to that at all? Is that really what it is? Are you kind of like, okay, that sounds like an interesting thing. I just want to do it and see what happens. Or
yes. Well, it's that mixed with like, well, it's weird. I'm motivated by that mixed with like, if the situation makes me uncomfortable or reticent or tentative or doubt myself in any way, I'd be like, can I really do this? You know, I remember, I mean, multiple, like I just had Cleric, and then I met Matt Buckley and who had this other band, which was more in like a hardcore botch converge vein, and he was a drummer, and his sense of phrasing and rhythm was completely different in mine, to the point that it almost like intimidated me. And so that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to play guitar with him, because I never played
wanted
guitar
to figure it out,
with a rhythm guitar thing. Yeah, I wanted to figure it out. Exactly. I wanted to get that language. I got that language for sure. I'm not going to write riffs like that anymore, but like it became a part of my style overall. Right. And then, I remember also a similar thing when iNFiNieN formed. It was really the first bass player, Justin Carney's idea. Like the language was really his idea. So he used 5-6 note chords, polyrhythms. So the whole thing's just oscillating, but it won't have distortion. It'll be all clean guitar. It'll be like really lush, like this lush oscillating world, And I was like, man, I'm really intimidated by you because I don't play clean guitar. I just play metal. And like, I don't play jazz solos. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to change the key. Like I was just a noob, but just from, working with him and writing songs with him, got his language, and he taught me all these weird jazz chords that I like learned those tonalities, like the sharp 5 major 7 world, which I would never playing botch music. But now I actually have a context for like improvising. I could just set down as a drone and actually I'm comfortable in there. Whereas like, before meeting him, I don't know what that is, and then, the final boss level is Zorn and deciphering his fucking alien scores that do make sense after you're used to it. But that's like going to college. It's just like all the albums I've done now, 14 records, they all came from these scribble scores, jazz script micro scores, and I have to figure it all out and figure out the ergodynamics and understand it, not just be able to play it, but understand what it is. And like I didn't understand the nested tuplet world or Hockett's or any of the weird minimal shit. That none of that was. And then doing Simulacrum was like, and just some Zorn stuff, like that's a lot of where he's coming from. So now I'm hip to that. So it's just like, it's about building a language. And I guess that's where like, the commerce shit where it's like, I'm in a band to achieve this in my scene. It's a closed system, right? Where you're like seeking to accumulate language and knowledge. That's an open system. But if it's like, I need to market, and dominate, it's like, that's a foregone conclusion. It's closed in itself. That's the main thing I feel like I learned from people that I've learned from is it's really about like looking outwardly and as soon as all these like weird convoluted ideas come in from the scenes or honestly music schools sometimes or just society in general, it just gets in the way like really bad and it doesn't do anything. And it is a rough time to be making music, but I think if you're motivated by exploration, then there's a lot left to do, even if it doesn't seem like it. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, I'm basically motivated by making the language overall more grand and large. So if I feel like I can learn something from anyone, I'll play with them. I'll do a CD with them. A year or two ago, I got to play with John Longstreth from Origin and Gorguts a little bit. We jam a little bit, and
nice.
He's just unbelievable. But just our rhythm styles are very different, and so they complement each other, but they also freak each other. We freak each other out when we're improvising, so it's just really fun to play together. I don't know if that'll ever metastasize into like an actual CD, but we set the seed for a relationship, and I've already learned. Just from the little bit I've played with him, I've already feel like I've learned a little bit. And anyone that I feel like will elevate me and challenge me and push me and so maybe it's just about like being in situations you don't feel comfortable. So like I was always just attracted to things that would maybe I was questioning whether I'd be able to do it.
Right.
And I would try to look for those situations and like if I had intense instinctual fear and be like, you're not, you have no business doing this or that kind of thought, like I would just do it. I would like look for like things that made me feel that way. I would aggressively do them. Because I think discomfort is growth at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully that answers the question.
And then some. No, that was great.
All right. Yeah.
It's cool to hear you talk about, like, a lot of times when people talk language, like working with other people, they tend to focus on like harmonic or melodic language. But you mentioned it multiple times, like he had a rhythm language that I didn't understand, or like it wasn't like quite, I didn't quite get it. Like that's awesome. It's just cool to hear like someone talk about that. Like, yeah, you got it. Like there is a language of rhythm, right? When you're playing with other people, and how do they feel, and what's their tendencies, and all these kind of like little nuances, right? That you can tell, and that's sort of the magic when you play with Cleric, for instance, right? You guys have all played with each other so long that it's like locked in, even when you probably don't think about it. But it's just because you know each other so well and a lot of times it's rhythmic. And we all listen to it and our jaws drop, and you're like, oh, that was just like, we've been doing that forever, you know? I don't know. It was kind of cool to hear about that. I don't know if I've ever even thought of it like that. So that was cool.
Oh yeah. I mean, Larry's another person that's taught me so much. I mean, he taught me how to play at like 25 BPM and shit. You know what I mean? Like, just like that it's so crazy. Like, I mean, you know, it's really great what's happened with Cleric, because we built this studio in our bassist house, Dan's house, and we've recorded like 24 songs there since last June.
Oh, dang.
And there's one song we did that's like this 16-minute like funeral ballad. I mean, it's a Cleric ballad, so it's obviously like destruction and chaos, but it's like at that ballad tempo. And we didn't use a click, and it was like recorded over like multiple weekends because it's such a big song. And like I like put the click in the DAW, and it just didn't move. He didn't move like the entire time. There's like all these weird tuplet parts where he's not riding the cymbal, and motherfucker just didn't move. And I sent him a text like, bro, like you literally, like all those weekends, you were just like hypnotized on this tempo, and it's a slow tempo. I think it's like 72 or something. And that's like, it's really hard to do that with no click. So like, you know, the stoicism Larry has in his tempo is just completely profound. Like, and it's not about like, he can play fast, but like, it's, you know, playing slow is a lot harder, especially like consistently and making just an audience feel it. That's like a really hard thing to do is with no click. And I think, you know, Larry helped me feel that sort of dotted whole time. If you like, you know, like tied whole time, it's like half the speed of whole time. That's where Larry feels beats sometimes. And it's just like, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, always south of 50 BPM. He's like, oh, that's where you want to ride the cinema. Oh, okay. All right. Wow. It's like he's like literally turning the speed down on a DAW, you know, like, you know, 50% slower. Like, it just feels like that when you play, you know, because we all loved, obviously, Neurosis and Khanate and ISIS and all that stuff. And Larry loved Khanate, especially this one album, Things Vero, and just all the dead air space, the tension that creates before the next hit. It's like so much more tension than if you went, it's like just going, and it's like, oh my God, when's the next hit? When's the next hit? It's like you're like falling through space. So we, you know, that was the Cleric thing. It's like mixed both worlds, like the quantum world with the mountain world, you know.
Perfect description of it, though. Really, I mean, like when I first saw you guys, him introduced me to you guys when we met in school around like 2006, and then we saw you guys play at Annabelle's. I don't remember, was it like 7 or 8? 2007 or 8 when we saw
I don't
them
know.
down there.
It was probably
after
that.
It was 2007. It was December 2007.
Yeah.
Was it?
We were like loud as shit and hyper obnoxious at that point. Yeah.
It was. But the thing, it's like I listened to the CD, and then I was like, all right, this seems like, you know, it's kind of my frame of reference at the time was like, all right, it's like 9 Inch Nails, but taken to the outer atmosphere of chaos.
Awesome.
And then I was like, all right, how are they going to pull this off live? Was the first thing going through my head. Yeah. And then you guys started, and I was like, all right, I'm going to need a wheelbarrow for my jaw. Cause like, it wasn't just that you were pulling it off. It was that it was unbelievably tight. I'm like sitting there for years later, introducing guys to your music, being like, no, you don't get it. When they play this live, it is on point. This is not chaos. This is absolutely disciplined, playing together experience. There's nothing like flimsy about this. And that's the thing that gives it this underlying structure that seems like at the very end of it, it's all, in one sense, your structure is the mountain, but when you're listening to it, you have this quantum thing, to use both your terms, of just chaos that seems to come forth. And until you, in one sense, I'd say, until you experience it live, it's almost like you don't get the depth of how well it all clicks together.
Yeah, I think that's right, and we're definitely proud of that because people still love Regressions and retro, but I definitely feel that way. I don't feel that it's matching the live experience of being in the room with the the sub bass and just the noise and the volume filling your body and Larry's 27-inch China cymbal. I mean, to really do that thing justice, it's like you got to be in the room with it, well, I appreciate everything you said so much, and that is one thing that we try to do with Cleric is like have like a mountain phrase implied, and then within it these like fractal quantum things happening. So it's like a multi-dimensional thing going on where there's like maybe there's a doom riff under everything. There might be some like tuplet thing within there. There's a sort of a micro polyrhythm. There's a little sample. There's some crazy keyboard texture. So it's all this micro and macro stuff at the same time that I think makes it work. And then just the extremes, like going ultra quiet to just like bombs, like just trying to make bombs go off. Like I don't think that that's an approach I hear that often in metal, is like where they're just trying to achieve like this sonic, it's a sonic thing as much as it's technical. We're really trying to get that sonic thing going on, and I appreciate everything you said. Thank you.
Yeah, I think really what's fascinating about so let's just dive into Cleric. Like, if you haven't heard Cleric's like the greatest metal band ever at this point, basically. Like,
now you made them hate it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. But that's good, right? It's good press. All press. No, but I mean, like, it's like a lot of metal bands, like they kind of fit in these. These cookie cutter sort of things, and then even all the time stuff, right? It's like, I don't know. I'm gonna pick on Gent or something right now, like that whole it's a very specific, specific kind of way of approaching rhythmic stuff, and it's almost become boring because it's so predictable in the type of rhythmic language it is using. We use that term. Even though it's impressive in a lot of ways, and then you look at like speed metal, death metal, there's a time thing where it's almost like it is played to a click. It's very tight in that sense. But like Cleric, what I hear that's fascinating, and I think maybe this is a bit what Adam was alluding to when you see it live, is like there's tempo shifts and there's all these kind of like this very like organic sense of time, but it's super tight. Like you said, if you put it against a metronome in certain sections, those would be
that's
tight.
All deliberate.
Yeah, and it's all tight. But yeah, it's like very organic. Like it's somehow organic in a world of metal where it's not organic, right? It's like this very specific. You got to fill it this way. I don't know. It always seems to me when I listen to one of the tracks, it just evolves and it grows and like almost like a great classical piece of music. Like from all the, especially 20th century stuff, right? Where it's always expanding, contracting, and all these kind of things are happening, and there's underlying themes and whatever are all going on. I don't know. I keep rambling, but
no, I appreciate
it's the time thing that's like really fascinating. On top of all the other stuff that's going on.
Well, I think again that goes back to what I'm saying about Larry, where he's kind of got this wizard thing with the time.
Yeah,
it's very rough to come by, especially I mean, we're definitely I don't get too much into this, but we're definitely all exennials in the band, which means, you know, I really just missed the internet thing when I was in high school. I do think it's fair to say that's different than straight up millennials. And I do think that, you know, not older millennials from the 90s, but maybe millennials that were born from 2000 on, they grow up playing to the computer. They grow up with the quantization. And I'm not making a total blanket statement here. But like there's certain guys who it's just like it's inner, and you listen to them and their time, you know, and it's better than quantized, because I mean, I just feel like quantized only works for like a very narrow like slab of styles of music, and the majority of music, like if you want organic, I don't feel that quantized will give you what you're talking about. And I think Larry just has that naturally, because like in Doom sections, it's almost like he'll conduct us sometimes when the next hit comes. And it is like some of the hardest shit to do. I mean, I remember Aloe Triophagy, the first track on Regressions, like we got through the first 12 minutes because we played it for years in like an hour or so. Like just, it literally took no time in the studio. And that Doom section took like 3 hours, which is just one riff that loops 4 times, but it's so goddamn slow and that it's like, it was just so fucking insufferable to record that thing. And Colin was making jokes about it, like how it's like, it's funny. It's like all this quantum hypertext shit. It's like, drop this 16th note here and then do the palindrome. And then make it one longer. And it's like, that's no problem. It's like printing it. You know what I mean? And then the Doom song, the Doom part that has all this dead air that goes for miles. You're like, where's the sign? It's like, it's already gone. And you're like, you already missed it. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's really, I don't think you're going to get that kind of vibe for like the vortexy. I've noticed lately I'm really attracted to this sort of vortexy, like, oh, where's the ground? Oh, God. You know, and I think Cleric has already kind of achieved that within the sort of tightness of the, like, you know, it's this feeling, it's like about to burst, and then we go into those parts, and it just spreads out to infinity. Yeah. And, you know, what you hope is this sort of gives this sort of serenity. You know, and I've seen certain comments about Regressions online about that, how it's just this like, deep violence into deep serenity into like peace and sadness. And it's just like, it's like we're trying to make like a TV show and the full TV show. Like each song is an episode. That's why it's not like A, B, A, C, B, done. Yeah. B, A. You know what I mean? Like it's just not filling in a template. It's exploratory, and it's like, oh, what story is this telling? And maybe we're like looking outwardly for that answer. You know what I mean? And that's what enables that to even take place. Whereas if like, quantize it, play the click. Oh, you waited a little longer on this hit. So no, try again. It's like the point is if he waits longer, Larry, you know, into the Doom hit, like that's going to be, it's going to feel like more. It's going to, you know, and the thing is like, if you're doing that some drummers I play with, they don't do that deliberately, and it really doesn't sound good for sure. So I'm not making, like, it's stuff that you have to do deliberately and know what you're doing exactly. But Larry does, and he's, you know, that's what gives it this sort of organic thing, because he's more of a jazz drummer than a metal drummer. I mean, he can't do a lot of the gravity blast shit and, you know, blast for an hour and a half straight in a set. He couldn't do that. Like, that's not his style. Like, it's much more like Primus and Tool, and like, you know, he loves Nile, but he can't do that, you know. But then, you know, we opened for Nile, and George Callias was like, what the fuck? Like, he could not believe Larry. He didn't know what we were doing. And Thomas Hawk has seen us before and was like, you're insane people. He didn't know what we were doing. I mean, part of me feels insecure hearing that, but like, they both liked the album, and that like Callias tweeted about it, and he loved Larry, and they said that we were one of the best openers they ever had. And so, but like, we watched their set, and Larry's just losing his goddamn mind because he could never do that, because it's just a different thing. And this was, again, goes back to the language thing. You know, approaching drums like that is going to lead to that. Larry thinking the way he does is going to lead to what the other stuff we're talking about. But I don't think Callias could hang with a lot of that stuff, because you'd be like, what are you guys even doing? What is this part? You know, it makes total sense to us. But that's why it's not really a metal band in a weird way. It's just it's a heavy band.
Yeah, no, that's
but
fair.
I don't consider the music metal strictly, is because it baffles metal people. I see it on their face, so it's not. It's like it's an anti-rock band. I think it's fair to call it a rock and opposition band. I've seen people say that online, compare it to Henry Cow and say rock and opposition. I think that's totally fair. It's an anti-scene band. Sure. It's even anti-avant-garde. I mean, it's like we're not accepted in the avant-garde, not at all. They're not into the death metal distortion and the palm muting and the bit crusher. They don't want that. So it's no matter what we're in, we're always like, oh, this is dangerous. There's no way to like, control this and rein this in. Yeah. It's like by definition not reined in. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's kind of what makes me giddy about it. That's why I'm still doing it, because I feel like I haven't even reached the ceiling with that at all. I feel like I'm just kind of figuring out that that's what it's about. So and again, to have a different model instead of going through years of like, play this in a room. No, I mean, before we had the DAW, we like literally in Allotriology, we named each riff. But I'm saying, we used to just like slog together in a room and have to name the parts. And, since last June, since we had a studio, we always had the ability to get songs together way quicker. It just, the model wasn't there. So, we had 2 albums already done in a year. And I mean, one of them is completely done. One of them I'm mixing right now. And, oh my God, it was like such long sagas before that. I think it was even longer to make retro. It's like ridiculous. Like you can't go on like that, So I'm just excited to not be in that old model, and it doesn't make any sense to do that with the way.
So do you remember how to play all the songs that you guys recorded this year?
Probably not. But like when we make the set list, I'll deal with that.
Yeah. At least you have the tracks to listen to.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you, in that realm of composition where you're on the edge of like formal writing and improv consistently, how exactly do you chart something like that? For lack of better terms, is it like a full transcription? Do you have sections and just kind of like be like, oh yeah, that was this thing that's written out over here, but this I kind of got under my fingers? How do you approach relearning those particular tracks for a tour or whatever?
Well, at this point, I'm kind of getting into Guitar Pro, and like even with Retro and the Masada album after that, I wasn't doing that. It was just the shit I did. Like I remembered the songs, you know what I mean? Like I could hum them, and they were memorable to me. So I didn't really like. I only wrote the stuff down that I was like, that's really complicated. I don't want to remember that. And but a lot of it I just remembered. It was just based on what I could remember, which I realize now is terrible because that's always changing. So now I'm getting into like, you got too many things going on. You need to write everything down, and it's just better way of working. So I don't even like practice a song with someone until I have like a transcription and a map for them. So I've been using Guitar Pro, but I use Sibelius too if I want to do more like tuplety stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, not a lot of the Cleric stuff is written down, but I'm pretty sure Regression stuff, honestly, it's a lot of parts, but I played those songs like just so many times. It's like ridiculous. I played that stuff too much. I mean, maybe the stuff in the last 5 or 6 years, it's more what you're talking about, where like I probably don't remember a lot of it. But all the Zorn stuff is written down, and I just realized that like I'm just going to start doing that with my own stuff. Just so I don't have to do that anymore. So I'm going to loop parts like, what is that chord? What did I do? And it kind of slowly comes back. But it's weird. I don't know why, but I just have no trouble remembering everything from Regressions. I mean, I know it's like 80 minutes of information, but it's just literally, we just did it it just felt like 10 years straight or so. I mean, it wasn't. It just, I just feel like that's more than I played any amount, like, songs ever. You know what I mean? So I just think it's just in there. It also, when you think about it too, that stuff happened before I was trying to do all these albums at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
And I think when you try to do that, you know, it's easier to forget stuff. But at the time, that was basically the main thing. So I like lived and breathed those parts, and everything had to be exactly perfect. And I thought about it all the time. So, you know, it's almost like old information to me. I don't need to like, but only Regressions is really like that. A lot of this other stuff recently, because it's just like, go, go, go. You know, it's just like, yeah, it's lying on the side of the road. I don't know what that is. I would totally be at 0 if I had to go back. So, but I realize now I can't do that anymore.
So Matt, something when I saw you last time, we jammed or whatever, and I realized you tuned in C sharp, right?
Well, I think maybe that day I was, but I'm always messing around.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess do you
the 7th string Cleric is always a half step down.
Okay.
We just stay half step down. 7th string. Like,
and so when you do like the Zorn stuff or whatever, you just stay in standard. Is that so?
Yeah, that's all standard.
So when you read in standard, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I was wondering. You played in C sharp, and in my head, I was like, man, is he like? Did he translate the whole thing, and so he just reads in C sharp? But
no. Well, I mean, once in a while, Zorn will be like down tuned metals. This is, you know, drop C, and it's like then it's kind of weird, but like I can't do it in the moment with those songs, so I make tab ahead of time. But basically everything's standard. But Cleric, you know, if we're making tab, we're making tab and rhythms, so it's not because there's no keyboards, or I guess not in the way that Medeski is a keyboardist, and Nick just tunes half step down. So if we want to write something out, we just pretend it's in that works. Which is real like weird shit, but whatever. But yeah.
Cool. So just to clarify that I'm picking up what you're putting down, you play a half step down. It's all written in standard notation, but it's kind of like, you know, when you're reading a guitar score, everything's got the 8 below, everything's heard an octave below what's written. So with your situation, it would be standard notation, but everything's heard a half step low.
Just with Cleric, no one. I get. Well, no, it would say it was written for Nick. It would just be written standard, and then because it's really convoluted, but because his keyboard is down a half step, so C would actually be B if I was just giving him a notation. But me and Dan, we don't even do that. We just do tabs with rhythm on top of the tab, and we just. But with Zorn, it is all real music. It just doesn't make any sense for Cleric to do that. It's like an extra. I don't know why, but we and also everyone in Cleric likes to memorize. We don't really like to read. We like to just remember a riff and just play it. Yeah. So it's more just like cheat sheets. Whereas like Zorn, it's like there's still stuff I read, and Medeski reads a lot of it still. So because we don't do it enough. So it's a little, it makes more sense as the system for that.
So what's a typical Zorn thing? Like, so a new album's coming up, right? Or whatever. Does he send you a bunch of new tunes, and then do you guys rehearse a couple times and then record, or do you just go straight to the studio? What's the general process there?
He sends me an album, and it's like a full album, and it's usually like 16 to 20 pages. And, it's like jazz script and Drew composed, and then improv is written in to the scores, and he'll say like, fast jazz, or he'll write that you improvise in a fast jazz, and that's kind of open. It'll just say fast jazz. It won't be like an actual part. Or there'll be like drone, and it'll do a squiggly line next to the whole note. And that's supposed to be like open-ended drone, and it would say 30 seconds above it. Like just stuff that like that's not like stuff I didn't think about that like is writing the improv into the score. Yeah. And that's one thing that you know, because he was really into Cage, and that's also what he's done. If you see his scores from Naked City, it's like it's the same. It's the same thing. It's like the same kind of. It's not like the same ideas, but it's the same way of like
presenting,
approaching it, and representing ideas and stuff. And so in Simulacrum, there's like some improv stuff that goes on that's like kind of tropey, right? Like there's advanced sections where those are like anti-music kind of sections that are really jerky. I mean, it's supposed to be like Jackson Pollock, kind of like everyone plays with staggered rests, so it creates this randomized paint splatter effect. And then the fast jazz, since I'm not used to that shit, like halfway into the discography realized you're supposed to feel it on the upbeat, which is funny. So like my contribution to that is to be real disjunct, and like I'm trying to play fast jazz, but I can't quite do it.
Right.
That's the vibe for a lot of my stuff. But Medeski's obviously destroying all that stuff.
Yeah. It
really plays to his strengths. And then there's there's solo forms, which we've gotten more into lately, more mature or whatever. It's just like, E flat sus for 4, and, like F sharp, so, G flat sus for 4, E flat sus for 2, it's repeat, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So do you guys do rehearsals and stuff too, or?
Yeah. So sorry. Yeah. So yeah. Well, I'll get the score together, and then I'll meet up with Kenny twice tops, never more than twice. I mean, there was a point where we did it. We like wrote beats ahead of time, and Zorn hated all the beats we wrote, so we just stopped doing that because it was just a waste of time. Because so it's weird because you want to prep past a certain point, but you don't want to prep too much because then it's like wasted. It's like a certain
creative
type of
energy or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and it very much feels like almost like a live gig when you're there because it's all within 2 days, and then you mix the third day, and then that's it. So there's a feeling of almost like it's gambling or something.
Yeah.
So I'm like a nut, like right before that. Like I like do experiments at home with my tone and stuff. And I've had a couple misfires where it's like it still ends up being fine. But if it was up to me, I would reamp the guitar and I would try to get a better tone. But like it's just not what it's about. It's more just about like what happens there in the moment,
Yeah, that's cool.
And I realized like that's what's cool about it. The trick is to just not tie your identity to the album too much. It's just be like, it is what happened. The Cleric stuff is what I go crazy on and make perfect.
Yeah. Well, it's cool. I mean, that's like I talk about Coltrane a lot. Like he's probably my favorite, like just musician in general. I don't know, whatever, at least today. Yeah. But I mean, overall, if I'm really honest, is the person like I can dive back into all the time. Mm-hmm. But I think like, man, if he would have grown up in our era, we would have got like 3 albums. But luckily, because everybody, it would have been like every 3 years or every 4 years put out an album. Right. And he would have died, and we wouldn't have ever seen like this progression of all the stuff that he did. But like at the time, it was like, I don't know how much say he had, and I imagine not that much say. He would come in, they'd record a day, and then they record another day, and then the record people would just put the albums out, and probably didn't even like run it by him. I doubt he even knew what it sounded like before it got released. A lot of times, and it kind of sucks in a way, right? As a musician, you're like, man, that would suck, but we're blessed with these things that just happen. Like we get these like pictures of that moment and where he was progressing or what things he was working on and like how it was developing and what stuff got dropped and what stuff kept going. I guess when I see that's I'm a huge fan of improv as well, obviously. But that's the magic of it. Like it's this, like maybe it's not perfect. Maybe if you would go back, you would have redone it like 20 times. But it's also like that's where you were with that thing that day. And that's kind of awesome. Right. Yeah.
Right. It's just a different philosophy than like, I don't know, when I make a Cleric album, I feel like I'm making a movie or something.
Right.
It's like every little scene. It's like everything, like the whole, it's just, it seems like way different, you know, than just going in and this is what you did that day.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it's like schemes. It's like long scale schemes with Cleric more than that, which is like, you know, before meeting Zorn, there's like one improv solo on Regressions, and it's like supposed to just be noise, and like Cumberbund solo is improv, I think, and that's it. It's just like I wasn't trying to do that. I wasn't putting that in my music. Nope.
Yeah.
It's like immediate. Like by the end of Retro, we're kind of unhinged maniacs because we ran out of our plan, and Larry's just playing, and you really hear the real violence and the ecstasy, and that's what I realized about Zorn's approach. I took a little bit of that because I try not to like over plan since meeting him, because I realized it actually shuts expression down. You know, one of these records we did was we did a 19-song record for Zorn. It's only 41 minutes, which is pretty cool. So it's all these really short pieces. We kept mixing up the instrumentation, so it's like 19 tracks. So some tracks are like three guitars, drums. Other tracks are like 2 guitars, keyboard, drums. You know, there's one song that's 2 basses, 1 guitar. So it's just all over the place. But I remember just, because you got to produce yourself, you know what I mean? If you do the DIY thing, that's one of the hardest parts, is like keeping your emotions out of it and really trying to judge clearly when you have finite energy left and trying to put energy towards that. It's definitely hard. But we just consistently as a group during that Bagatelle sessions, we would just always pick the unhinged maniac take over the tight, slick take. You know what I mean? Like yeah. There's like Larry has the ability, because he's so good, to sound tight while sounding loose, and that's kind of what you're talking about. And like him sounding like Thomas Hawk or Danny Carey is boring, and like it's actually like dumbing him down. He's much more like a Zach Hill type personality on the drums, and like you're not gonna like get that to come out by just over planning everything in this like OCD way. Like those musicians are very OCD, and they should do that. But Larry's like unhinged and wild. It's much more like Dionysian kind of shit. And, you know, like it has to be unleashed. You can't just be like, play this part. I mean, one mistake we made on Retro, and you can kind of hear this when you listen to it, is the like everything until the last 2 songs had a hyper plan, like that was, you know, programmed. Like Larry programmed the drums, and you know, but like we made a plan that was like very specific, and Larry was trying to reach that level of the plan, but the plan didn't always relate to what he was good at doing. You know what I mean? And it's still a great record, but that's the one thing that's different than Regressions. Is Regressions we were all in a room and we just went naturally with what felt right, and we were kind of disconnected from that when we were writing Retro. And it was weird to be doing Zorn at the same time and realize all this stuff about philosophy, realizing like expression is above tightness in terms of artistic value. Like anyone can play a part tight and then quantize it.
A computer can do it, right? I mean,
a computer can do it. So literally, like, you want the unhinged shit that you're like, you can't program that. Listen to that. It's insane. You know, and that's like, we would always pick those takes into Bagatelles, you know, over the like, this is really solid and tight. It's like, so what? It's just boring, you know? Like, and I mean, this is coming from someone, I love Meshuggah, and I love, I can appreciate King Crimson, and I love, I understand that prog OCD approach. That's fine, but that's just blatantly not the musicians we are. You know?
Right. Yeah. If you haven't got anything else out of this interview, you must check out Larry Kordowitz on all this stuff, man. He's just monster drummer, monster musician. So next time you listen to the Cleric records, just like hone in on the drums for a while if you can. Man, it's just like a study in creativity and, like you said, unhinged brilliance or something.
Yeah, and I can't call him brilliant because, you know, I'm biased, but I do think, you know, as philosophy, you know, I think just the expressive takes come from almost an anti-tightness. It's like, you know, you're deliberately pulling back on this beat and then you're pushing ahead on the next one. And you're making people notice it because it's not steady. You know what I mean? Quantized is like, why am I like, it's background music, right? Like, I don't know. That's just where I'm kind of at with terms of philosophy.
Yeah.
And, making retro and doing the drum programming for the first time and going through that, which is almost like a gent approach. I hesitate to use that word, but it doesn't sound like that. There's enough. It's more like it's a different style than that, but it's approached in that way, and it just gives it this stiffness that Regressions didn't have, because you don't program improv parts. You know what I mean? Like so you don't realize that. So like, in Aloe, it's like first 2.5 minutes, there's like just this volatile, like it's about to burst. And then when that first like free hit comes in, just the whole world, just like the ground falls out, it's just open space. Like, I don't think I would have come up with that with Larry on the computer using the drum machine. Like, I think we needed to be in the room, hearing the amp, and just be like, oh, wow, listen to that. Just hold the note. Because the MIDI sound doesn't feel like anything. Yeah. There's an aspect of like the sound creates the part. And like when you're just like these dinky, terrible guitar MIDI sounds that are like, these rhythms will be cool when I play. And it's like, yeah, it's cool. But
it's definitely always better, cool right, than the MIDI. But not if it's all.
I mean, it's good to have the map, but the map is not the territory.
Yeah,
that's what I'm really at. It's like the map is not the territory. If you make it sound like it's quantized and you play it like that, that sucks. It just sucks. It's like, what's the point? That's just where I'm at with this. I think Zorn kind of made me see that, because it's like he would always pick. Be like, but I missed the downbeat. He's like, so fucking what? Or I remember I don't mind telling this story because I think it's funny and it actually helped me a lot. And again, it goes to like, discomfort is growth. Like, doing the third record for him, Inferno, and it was like I was really trying to impress him, so I like worked out all these like pre-improv schemes ahead of time based on the written part, but of course it didn't pan out that way. So I was being like hypermodal and like self-conscious, you know what I mean? Like, and like he fucking hated it, and he literally was like, man, what are you doing playing scales? Like, scales are old school. It's like that's like from the 50s and shit. Don't play scales. It's like, play shapes, moods, textures. And I'm like, oh yeah. And like we ended up like, I went do this squealing thing with the whammy and like speeding up and slowing down over the vamp just randomly when I felt like it. And just realizing like it's this Dionysian thing. It's like Apollo and Dionysus. Apollo hated Dionysus because he could never make art as good as him. And, they represent two spirits in the human psyche. Like, Apollo is the spirit of like reason and order and predetermination and self-consciousness, and which is good for some things, but madness is useful, right? Like Dionysus is about madness and about ecstasy and intoxication. And like, that is more what Zorn's about. And I realized like approaching Cleric is more of a Dionysian vibe. And as fucked up as Meshuggah is sounding, thinking about the way they approach the music, that's Apollonian, right? Like, that's more order, reason, very OCD, everything hyper organized, very planned. You could say that about a lot of these bands that influenced me growing up. But I realized the magic is kind of in this unhinged confusion that gets randomly caught in the session. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you were talking about how you look at the songs like kind of like movies, and I wonder now a little bit. And you see it sometimes, but you don't really get a behind the scenes look. Like, are some of the best movies we see, like, how much freedom is given that lets the actors, play the character that they've created or whatever, that we might think was scripted, or we might think was totally planned out, or even like the camera angle, like. A lot of times those things seem so like specific, right? But maybe I bet if you talk to a lot of directors or something, especially the ones who make more epic things, right? That there's probably an element of chance, right? That helps give it the sort of madness or whatever that makes it more appealing. Where if they tried to write every little thing that it was doing, they might miss out.
Well, I'm at the point now where I know that I would miss out. And it gets into like, I'm taking more influence now from my subconscious and sorting out subconscious elements and organizing them after the fact. But I'm at the point where I don't think my conscious mind can imagine stuff that's as neat and as interesting as the subconscious can. And I try to, at this point, just get out of the way and catch a lot of it. And there's times where I just put on the click and I'll play for like 40 minutes. And, you know, maybe there'll be 3 things in there that happen once. And I'm like, there it is. And it's like, you can tell it like really stands out, like this golden thing. And I realized that stuff, I get more novel stuff, and it ends up being stuff that I would never think of. Like, I wouldn't think of it. Like, I know that. So I'm really trying, like, this idea of like being, you know, connected to this sort of translocal environment, like music's a continuum that's really mostly in our subconscious. That's why we all hear songs when nothing's playing. You know, it's really in the sky. It's above earth. It's in another dimension. It's like, I think the subconscious is like way more connected with that, because the problem with the conscious mind is it wants to believe the ego is like this king thing and like I'm the cleverest person that ever exists. That's what like we all want to believe about ourselves, but it's just not true. And I think at least for me, like it's more like it's fishing, you know what I mean? And it's like I try to just not tie my identity to what comes back and just sort out the gold from the shit and just take the gold and mine the diamonds and then just slowly, you know, and build a thing up. But I think if the root comes from the subconscious, it's freed from this sort of like, I mean, you know, I really love Terrence McKenna. He really helped me out in my 20s. And he obviously, he always said, culture's not your friend. And I totally think that's true when it comes to, you know, this sort of our cultural hangups kind of get in my way. Because I'm really looking for that like alien thing that makes you go like, whoa, you know, but then it seems like this, like you're in a new space. Like I'm looking just for this sort of break through the membrane kind of stuff. And I just don't think I can sit here and think of something and like try to think of something. I think I have to just open my mind up and like cast it out, bring a bunch of shit back and find that like little diamond, you know, literally these phrases will happen once. You know, and that's just really been my approach the last few years, because it took me fucking forever to write shit. I mean, I don't know how your progression is. It's taking me less time now, but literally took me like 5 years per album, and I just don't. I don't want to do that. Like I just don't want to do that. So I just wanted to come up with another system that wasn't so hyper self-conscious, and you know. If I don't know why I played something, it's easier to like not be like, but I did that. You know what I mean? And then I can actually like mold it and not tie my identity to it and really make it objectively powerful, you know, because I'm noticing its objective power within all the other stuff that's going on in that improv or whatever. So I don't know. Hopefully this is making sense, not too convoluted.
No. Go ahead, Adam. Yeah.
No, just to interject one point on your movie analysis of like improvising the movie scene. That's that famous scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark where Indiana Jones shoots the guy. That was totally like unscripted, and they both just acted it out like on the spot. Like the other guy didn't know that Harrison Ford was going to like grab for the gun and just do it, but he just like he saw it and he just did the jump back. They had to add if I'm remembering right, they had to add the sound effect of the gun after the fact. Because Spielberg was like, that's it. That's the scene. Done. Wow. You know, it's like, so.
Yes, you got to imagine the best directors, they have to have some element of chance that they allow, you know, in their productions. Well, I mean, maybe not everybody, but a lot of them at least.
But there's certain directors that like won't tell actors the plot. Like they're not meant to know aspects of the plot.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Surprise when it happens. Like I know David Lynch likes doing that. Like everyone's in the dark. Or like Stanley Kubrick did one scene in Shining like 80 times, like someone just walking through a door, and he wanted to get them to that point where they were just beaten down, and he saw it on their face, and no one else around him knew what, you know what I mean, he was doing.
Really, we're gonna do another
like,
one.
You have it. Like, and he's like, and he wanted everyone there to feel that because that's what he wanted to capture.
Right.
And it's like again, you know, it's like give a strategy and schemes. Like strategy to enable randomized mystical things to happen. I've kind of gotten more into that like since, you know, this sort of OCD, like let me follow Tool and Meshuggah and the Gent guys for a second. It's like, nah, I don't want to do that. You know, it's like, it's way more like the random shit is way more exciting. You know, some alien stuff can come in that you're just like, I wouldn't have thought of that, like, period. Like, no way.
Yeah.
You know, and like, again, like performances too. It's like some of the best shit in retro is when it's like, all right, we ran out of drum parts, so just feel this part. And it's just like, holy shit, why did we write any of the drum parts? Like literally, like that's what everyone's reaction, like in the last 2 tracks of that are just like, we shouldn't have written one drum part on this. Seriously. Should just give them a click, let them imagine it, like no plan.
Right.
Like I just realized that we went too far. You know what I mean? And I love retro, but that my one issue with it, it's like you could tell it was hyper planned, and it's not unhinged enough. As crazy as it sounds, I want more unhinged. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, that expression is better than tightness. That's just the bottom line. It's expression way above tightness. And I think even with the random person that isn't a musician, I think that's also true. I think they notice it more.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's a total authenticity thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because they feel you. Oh, they're like feeling something. They notice that with just playing something tight. You know, it's almost like the way Meshuggah writes. It's like you feel the part because of the way it's written more than the way they feel it because they're just playing it. You know, I mean, I'm being hypercritical right now, but and it's not even critical, but it just goes to the point of like express the part, don't recreate the part. I think there's a difference, you know. I don't think I was that clear on that for a long time. It's just, you know, it's almost like your rock band gets into like you're a cover band of yourself. You know, you do the same thing over.
You mean like the new Tool album? I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's not. Even, I mean, everyone's thinking that, and you know, here's the thing with that too. Is like I see both sides because you know.
Oh, I get it.
So I've heard people say about Simulacrum is like, I don't need another da-da-da-da, right? And it's like, if you're being hypercritical, you can pick out all the elements where it's just like, they're just repeating that element, you know? But like, the point Zorn made to me, which I agree with, is like, if you listen to Mozart or Beethoven, it's kind of similar thing. You know, they're repeating lots of this. It's like a language. So it's like, I realized like, I even was like at a certain point, like, why is every part dun 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 dun? Like, right, like just leave out the first note even. Go like dun dun, you know. And so everything dun 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 dun. And I realized it's not about dun 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 dun. It's his rhythmic stamp, and then he'll do the real phrase after dun 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 dun, and that's always different. So it's just like the style of music. That's Zorn. We're playing Zorn, not blues. You know, it's like blues has tropes too. Right? Thrash metal has tropes. This is the Zorn trope, right? There's probably Cleric tropes. Bum. That's a Cleric trope. But what do we do after that, right? So I started to realize, like, just compositionally, the thing up front is a stamp. And, you know, it's like when you're making that many albums, it's a little reductive to just focus on that because it's not only about that, right? Like, and so even I just like thinking about that because it's like, you know, it is about making a language. Some of it might sound similar. That's fine. I mean, a lot of Slayer's discography sounds similar, right? Iron Maiden, 167 forever, right? Like it's 40 years of that. Like, I mean, Metallica, Locrian, and Phrygian. Yeah, I mean, it's something to the. It's a language because there's only 12 notes, so it's, you know.
I think when I got just to pick on Tool because. Why not?
I actually like that album more than 10,000 Days. If I had to pick between the two, I think that would.
I agree with you there. I guess what I noticed though, like when I listen to Cleric, right? I hear you evolve because the things you listen to evolve. You're talking about evolving by playing with Zorn, like. You've had experiences, things you might have listened to as a kid you don't listen to as much anymore at all. There's all kinds of new stuff and then it soaks into your playing. Whether you tried to figure it out or not, it just becomes part of you.
It's a subconscious thing.
Yeah, right. But then when you hear the Tool thing, it's like, so you're telling me in the last 10 years, 15 years or whatever, you haven't listened to anything new like that affected the way that you play.
Right. That was really my takeaway too, honestly. I mean, like, I like that album more than 10,000 Days, but my main takeaway was like, either they're like terrified to take one harmonic risk, or they literally haven't listened to music since like 2004.
That's what I'm thinking. Like,
that's kind of what I think
like
too,
people that never, like, but it's hard to imagine.
Also, that Saint Anger thing where they're like, it just has to be the perfect version of Tool. Yeah. And they might be on this branding thing because it just happened over time, and like they can't help it. They only play that kind of music, so that's all they know how to play.
Yeah,
you know, I'm forced into these different realms. You know, so I'm like, okay, I'm pulled over here. Now I'm pulled back. Now I'm pulled back. Now it's like they're constantly different perspectives. So it's building up. And then maybe I stop doing a band and I do a new band. And I guess that to me is the main thing. It's like these bands like Tool, Metallica, you know, they've been around for decades, or dinosaurs. It's like, to me, I see these bands as like, you know, Cleric's kind of that for me. But everything else, you know, in a way, it's almost like, do it like a TV show. Like, you know, TV shows don't.
Yeah, there's a formula for it and everything.
Right, and Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones or, you know, True Detective, they go for when they should stop, and then they stop, and that's it. They're not coming back because that's the story. And I think it's fine for a band to do that, and for a band to end when it should end. You know what I mean? It's like, obviously I don't want certain bands to end, but I just think it's like, it's more like that model makes more sense to me than these bands that go.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
40,
so like you were supposed to do 6 seasons, it's over. Everybody goes on to do something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If bands could get more into that kind of thing, I think it's just a better approach. And then it is kind of a little like the avant-garde, because people just are constantly working with each other just to see what happens. And I would, you know, if people weren't so concerned about marketing and like, you know, like Danny Carey hasn't really done much else but tour, right? Like, I would love to hear him play with Ivo Popazov, or play with some totally different type of musician that does odd times, or, you know, he's done other stuff. Obviously, he played with Primus a little for that last tour, but generally, like, they stay insulated in their, but they like stay insulated in their comfortable worlds, and they don't take risks. And, you know, I still, you know, I feel successful artistically, but I'm not, you know, I'm not that monetarily successful, not enough that I feel like there's any stakes whatsoever. So what's it to me to change my style up, right? Yeah. But like, like a band like Tool is like, well,
there's a lot of people you have to feed.
Right. Or like Metallica, it's like all these roadies, they're unionized.
Yeah, they probably have 300 people working for them, right? Yeah.
It's just crazy. And it's like our fans have to like this riff. It's like, it's all self-conscious after a while. And you know, that's the one thing I have enjoyed about being semi-obscure, and like all the trends of the last 20 years kind of like, Cleric's just too weird for all of it. It's just like kind of a benefit, because it's more like that band like Sheer Accident or something, or like the Idiot Flesh guys or Sleepy Time guys. It just goes for decades under the radar. Eventually people catch on. And it's not really related to a trend anyway. So I prefer that path. The people I look towards did that. They didn't jump on anything. Yeah, they just did their own thing. They made their own world, and it just like stayed insulated.
That's wow. It's a lot. One of the chief words that I keep here popping up in my head during this whole conversation is aleatoric.
Is like, what?
Aleatoric.
Oh, okay. I never heard that.
Well, it's like chance music, you know, where they would, that movement. And you're kind of on the edge of that. Not completely, where there's no form and it's like literally just rolling dice and whatever you get goes onto the page type of thing. But it's pushed to that end for yourself characteristically. Like you're going to take a chance over here. And that's not, I don't mean to take a chance, but it's like you're moving in this direction to experience something new and push yourself out of the comfort zone.